At first glance, it just looks like another clean black Mercury hanging off a transom, same cowling, same badge, same promise to push your boat across the water. But here's the twist. Under that familiar shell is an engine that isn't just built to run today, it's built to evolve. Mercury has quietly wired this motor for a future of hybrid assistance, silent docking, and smarter control, without ever using the word hybrid in the brochure. By the end of this video, you'll see why this normal-looking outboard is actually a Trojan horse for the next era of marine propulsion, how Mercury hid tomorrow's technology inside a present-day combustion platform, and what that means for every other brand still pretending nothing is changing. Let's uncover the shocking truth behind Mercury's next-generation, future-ready outboard platform. A moment. Mercury has been building toward. Mercury does not chase spectacle. It chases momentum built over decades. When the market argued about two-stroke speed versus four-stroke cleanliness, Mercury bet on the future most people could not yet picture. When digital throttle and shift sounded unnecessary, Mercury demonstrated the difference one seamless control system could make. When joystick piloting seemed like a high-end novelty, Mercury showed how it could transform everyday docking. This new platform follows that lineage. It is not flashy or experimental. It is a culmination of smaller decisions Mercury has made across many seasons. The company refined its digital architecture through years of smartcraft evolution. It expanded its understanding of electric behavior through portable systems used on tenders and lake boats. It studied how hull builders design around control cables, fuel lines, steering rams, and battery positions. With each iteration, Mercury moved closer to an idea, an outboard that can thrive today but remain open to change. That long-term thinking has defined Mercury's strongest releases. They do not look revolutionary at first glance because the revolution is structural. The company did not redesign the cowling to attract attention. Instead, it redesigned the part no photograph captures, the internal organization, the modular pathways, the decision to make this engine a family rather than a moment, the world. Mercury is responding to. Boating is changing beneath everyone's feet. Regulations whisper before they shout. Noise limits appear in lakes that used to accept everything. Emission standards tighten around areas where wildlife and waterfront residents push for quieter, cleaner experiences. Fuel prices may fluctuate, but trends remind boaters that long days on the water come with growing costs. Wind, tide, and range expectations push owners toward engines that feel smooth, predictable, and efficient at real-world speeds, rather than brochure-perfect throttle settings. Meanwhile, customer expectations continue shifting toward integrated systems. Many boaters now expect their engines to behave like their vehicles and devices, predictable, intelligent, connected. They want dockside confidence, not twitchy, low-speed behavior. They want cruising that doesn't exhaust them. They want maintenance that doesn't require an annual lecture in terminology. A platform that survives in this world cannot be a sealed product. It must be adaptable, not only to new technology, but to new behavior. Mercury's new outboard acknowledges that complexity without forcing the industry into a future that infrastructure cannot yet support. It offers steadiness in the present while quietly preparing for the shifts that are coming. A platform designed for change, not just performance. From a few steps away, the engine looks like any refined modern Mercury. That familiarity is not laziness, it is a calculated choice. Builders trust shapes that fit their molds. Dealers trust motors that mount similarly to the ones they have handled for years. Owners trust equipment that looks proven rather than experimental. But under the cover lives a reimagined architecture. The internal layout treats the engine not as a monolithic piece of machinery, but as a living ecosystem. Cooling circuits occupy a dedicated tier designed for expansion. Ignition and power distribution sit in an accessible zone. Software and control modules rest where technicians can actually reach them. Wiring harnesses run through channels carved for clarity rather than improvisation. Even the midsection brackets and access panels read like instructions for future versions, not just this one. Modularity is more than convenience. It is Mercury's statement about long-term intent. When the time comes to introduce hybrid assistance, or refine battery logic, or update cooling to support new electrical loads, the company will not need to tear the platform apart. The bones are already shaped for evolution. That willingness to embed tomorrow inside today's product separates this release from ordinary model year refreshes, the heart of the new Mercury motor. Despite speculation about an all-electric leap, Mercury started this chapter with combustion. Not because the company fears electric propulsion, but because combustion still governs the realities of range, cost, and infrastructure in most boating markets. Instead of replacing gasoline, Mercury chose to enhance it. The new combustion head is cleaner, more efficient, and more forgiving to varying loads. Adaptive fuel mapping reads real conditions instead of assuming laboratory perfection. Real-time torque management smooths out the surges and dips that usually accompany shifting waves or shifting passengers. The throttle interpretation algorithm gives every small input meaning without amplifying mistakes. Anyone who has driven older outboards knows the dance of overcorrection. Too much throttle, too little, back and forth until the boat settles. Mercury's new management system cancels most of that noise. It turns the boat into a partner rather than an argument. At idle, the sound sits close to natural conversation. At cruising speed, the tone lays under the wind rather than fighting with it. These changes do not scream innovation. They feel like comfort, and comfort is one of the most powerful ways to change a market. If you've been around the docks lately, you can feel the shift beginning. But what about where you boat? Are you seeing signs that hybrid-leaning technology is becoming the new expectation, or does combustion still rule the conversation in your area? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear how this transition looks from your shoreline, and if this breakdown helped you understand the bigger picture behind Mercury's move, hit like so more boaters can find it. Make sure you subscribe as well. The next wave of outboard releases is already forming, and you'll want to be ahead of it when it arrives. A step toward hybridization without saying hybrid. Mercury has avoided calling this new platform hybrid ready, but the clues are woven into the machinery so plainly that anyone who looks closely can see the direction. High voltage lanes run through the wiring harness, not as afterthoughts, but as clean, deliberate pathways carved into the architecture. Cooling routes carry more capacity than the present components require, a subtle signal that the engineers built room for future loads. Even the diagnostic screens whisper hints, empty fields and inactive modules that appear designed for systems not yet included on this version, but clearly anticipated. This engine does not identify as a hybrid, yet it is not a traditional combustion motor either. It sits in the middle like a structural frame, waiting for additional layers. Silent docking modes, exhaust-free shoreline cruising, low-impact maneuvering in sensitive wildlife zones, and idle-free approaches through crowded harbors. All of these behaviors could be supported by a modest onboard energy source, not a massive battery pack, not a re-engineered transom, just a carefully integrated module supplying energy in the moments where combustion is least welcomed or least efficient. A small amount of stored power can accomplish an outsized amount of quiet precision. Anyone who has idled into a tight marina at dawn or tried to creep past a line of anchored boats without disturbing them knows that the quietest moments are the ones most in need of subtle, controlled thrust. A gentle spin of the propeller in absolute silence would feel like luxury, but it is also a form of courtesy toward neighbors, toward wildlife, and toward the marina staff trying to begin their day without the bite of exhaust. Rather than ask customers to wait for a sweeping reinvention of boating infrastructure, Mercury anchored the future directly into the present. They built the hooks, the lanes, the cooling, and the logic. They did not announce a hybrid, they made it possible. That strategy gives Mercury enormous flexibility. When demand crystallizes, or when regulations shift, or when marinas finally begin adding standardized charging options, Mercury will already have the platform in place. The company can move quickly without leaving early adopters stranded on an outdated island of technology. Owners, meanwhile, gain an engine that will not become irrelevant the moment the market takes its next step. Why this moment matters. Mercury chose this moment because the boating world has reached an unusual balance point. Technology has matured enough that digital-heavy engines no longer intimidate technicians. Boats are now sold with integrated helm displays rather than standalone clusters of mismatched gauges. Customers have grown to expect quiet operation, clean starts, and civilized throttle behavior. Meanwhile, regulators stand close enough to new emissions and noise standards that manufacturers cannot afford to ignore them, but not so close that full electrification becomes a requirement. In this landscape, Mercury found a lane between extremes. The company did not sprint toward headlines by unveiling a large, fully electric outboard that only a handful of marinas could realistically support. It also did not cling to pure combustion with the confidence that nothing will change. Instead, it released an engine that works everywhere right now, across lakes, rivers, and saltwater harbors, while also containing the internal scaffolding needed for evolution. It is a platform that behaves with maturity today, while keeping a quiet doorway open to tomorrow. That balance, firmly grounded, gently flexible, is rare in marine propulsion, where most manufacturers either chase the future too aggressively or defend the past too stubbornly. On the water, where claims live or die, everything technical becomes irrelevant once once the boat leaves the dock, that is where an engine must prove its worth. The first seconds of movement reveal more truth than a dozen printed specification sheets. With this motor, that truth arrives calmly. The departure is smooth, not twitchy. The boat glides forward without the lurch new operators often brace for. Idle settles into a soft hum beneath conversation, a sound that feels more like background presence than mechanical noise. As the throttle rises to mid-range, acceleration arrives without yanking passengers off balance. The boat responds with intention rather than abruptness. When navigating into a slip or approaching another vessel, the smallest throttle adjustments translate into proportional motion. There is no guessing, no lag, no unpredictable jump. Docking, which is often the moment that exposes an engine's flaws, instead becomes a demonstration of its control. Even in wind or moderate wake, the boat tracks true, responding to gentle corrections with clarity. Over longer runs, the reduced vibration becomes noticeable. Conversations remain natural. Fatigue settles in more slowly. People stay out longer, drift less into silence, and argue less about who has to take the wheel. The engine does not brag about its improvements. It simply accumulates them until the entire day feels easier, the experience of modern control. The helm becomes calmer. Information lives in a single language across the displays. Engine data, navigation views, fuel tracking, and alerts coexist without fighting for attention. Automatic trim adjusts for conditions without constant input. Cooling monitors give early warnings instead of scolding after a problem has already formed. Perhaps most notably, the control system treats human error with empathy. Sudden, awkward moves during docking do not result in exaggerated reactions. Gear selection confusion does not lead to unexpected thrust. The system smooths the edges, turning a learning curve into a shorter, more forgiving path. The helm does not feel like a laboratory experiment. It feels like a well-behaved extension of the operator's intention, which is exactly what modern boating demands. What this means at the marina: dealers and marinas see an engine differently than customers do. They see installation time, rigging conflicts, access panels, diagnostic stability, and long-term service patterns. For them, this engine reduces friction. Clean harness paths eliminate many of the improvisations that slow rigging. Thoughtful access panels shorten service tasks. Integrated diagnostics reduce guesswork. For marinas preparing for future hybrid or partial electric demands, this engine acts as a low-stress entry point. They can begin planning charging capabilities without betting on full electrification. They can train technicians on high-voltage safety long before the first battery-assisted variants arrive. A predictable, modular engine simplifies everything from scheduling to part stocking. Pressure on competitors: Yamaha Motor Company Limited, Suzuki Motor Corporation, and Honda Motor Company Limited each hold long-standing credibility in the global outboard market, but none have placed a mainstream, mid-range propulsion platform in front of the public that openly anticipates hybrid integration the way Mercury now has. Their engineering divisions have certainly experimented with electrification, and each maintains prototype programs tucked inside their research branches, but nothing currently available to buyers mirrors the future-facing structure Mercury has chosen to deploy at scale. That absence creates a psychological shift more powerful than any spec sheet. It forces each competitor to look inward and ask whether the slow and steady approach they have relied on for decades can withstand a marketplace where consumers increasingly expect engines to be modular, digitally fluent, and prepared for the arrival of hybrid behavior, even if that behavior does not show up for several more model cycles. None of these companies want to appear reactionary. Yamaha prides itself on bulletproof reliability. Suzuki emphasizes efficiency and clever mechanical design. Honda leans into its automotive heritage. Each identity is strong, yet those identities risk calcification if the perception grows that Mercury is the only brand acknowledging a propulsion landscape that will not look the same 10 years from now. Competitors can continue refining combustion-only platforms, but every incremental improvement will be compared to a system that has already built a bridge toward the next era. For customers, the question becomes less about which engine performs best today and more about which engine family still makes sense tomorrow. That subtle reframing adds pressure no executive can ignore. If any competitor swings too aggressively toward full electric power in response, they could find themselves demanding infrastructure that simply does not exist in most marinas. If they cling to combustion as though it were timeless, they may appear unprepared for the hybrid creep street that regulators, waterfront communities, and buyers are slowly favoring. Mercury's middle path, this balanced, grounded, quietly adaptable platform, becomes the path everyone else must justify not taking. It becomes the standard they must imitate, without seeming derivative or counter with something genuinely forward-thinking. The race, long paced by tradition and caution, now tightens because one major player planted a flag in the middle of the field and told everyone the center is shifting. That is the kind of move that accelerates engineering schedules, unsettles dealer networks, and forces long conversations inside boardrooms that had been content to drift for another few seasons. How boat builders respond. Boat builders thrive on predictability. Every hull mold, transom angle, and rigging tunnel exists because someone studied how outboards attach, how cables flow, and how often technicians need to reach behind panels to correct something. Engines that require large structural changes are expensive. Engines that surprise builders with new demands year after year complicate production schedules and turn rigging into improvisation. Mercury's new platform avoids those traps. It integrates cleanly with established control systems, matches familiar mounting patterns, and follows harness logic that builders already understand. At the same time, it offers enough forward compatibility that designers can shape models, confident they will not be obsolete when hybrid assistance eventually becomes mainstream. This balance gives builders breathing room. A center console manufacturer, for instance, can design a hull today knowing that the engine family it supports will accommodate deeper digital integration in a future premium trim, or perhaps a mild hybrid variant, once Mercury activates the capabilities that already sit dormant in the architecture. A lakeboat builder can offer a simple version for cost-sensitive buyers, while leaving pathways for small battery modules or upgraded helm systems in later offerings. This flexibility saves enormous money. Reworking fiberglass molds is one of the most expensive tasks in the marine industry. Every season a builder avoids that expense is a season they maintain stability in pricing and output. Over time, this predictability shapes entire lineups. Boats evolve not through abrupt overhauls, but through well-timed refinements, new dash layouts, cleaner rigging lanes, better weight distribution. Once the builder trusts the engine's behavior, the model families stay in production longer, which allows companies to invest in durability and customer support instead of spreading resources thin across constantly shifting designs. Owners feel this in small ways: cleaner storage spaces, less clutter near the transom, wiring that stays dry, helm stations that make sense without explanation. These changes do not grab headlines, but they quietly raise the baseline quality of new boats. Mercury's platform gives builders a reason to commit long-term, knowing the propulsion they choose will age with them instead of aging against them. What it means for boaters. Most people who spend their weekends on the water want the same three things: reliability, comfort, and longevity. They want a motor that starts every time, handles the unexpected without drama, and does not leave them budgeting for constant repairs. Mercury's platform addresses those desires without theatrics. It starts cleanly because the management system handles conditions intelligently. It runs quietly enough that conversation replaces engine noise as the companion sound of a trip. It handles predictably because it respects subtle throttle movements instead of punishing them. These improvements sound simple, yet they transform the emotional texture of a day on the water. Fuel efficiency also stops being a marketing claim and instead becomes a lived experience. Hours of running feel easier. Miles covered on half-throttle stretch farther. The boat moves smoothly because the engine's internal decision-making favors steadiness over sharp, wasteful throttle swings. Over a summer, that behavior trims real dollars from fuel bills, not theoretical laboratory savings, but practical reductions shaped by the way people actually drive. Then comes longevity. Engines have always aged, but not all engines age equally. Some grow harder to integrate with modern electronics. Some become difficult to diagnose. Some lose relevance when the market shifts around them. Mercury's platform avoids that fate. It belongs to an engine family designed to grow, change, and adapt. Even if a buyer never adds hybrid assistance or advanced displays, the knowledge that their motor could accept those systems gives them confidence. It becomes easier to sell, easier to justify, easier to trust years down the line. A second owner does not inherit outdated technology. They inherit a motor whose architecture still matches the expectations of its era. The environmental incremental layer. No internal combustion outboard will ever be free of environmental impact, but careful engineering changes the scale of that impact. Cleaner combustion reduces the total amount of fuel released into the air and water across a season. Quieter operation reduces disturbances in sensitive habitats, where marine life depends on predictable soundscapes, and the platform's capacity for hybrid assistance opens the door to silent operation in places where noise or exhaust once restricted boat access. These may seem like modest steps, yet they compound across thousands of engines. The important part is that none of these improvements demand massive infrastructure shifts. Boaters do not need new charging networks to benefit from quieter cruising or smoother combustion. Marinas do not need to rebuild docks. Regulators do not need to rewrite entire rulebooks. Progress is incremental, but it is real, and crucially, it does not punish early adopters. It rewards them with cleaner experiences, calmer mornings, and a smaller footprint without forcing a lifestyle overhaul. Why this engine matters more than its shape. At the dock, the motor will often go unnoticed. It will look like many Mercury outboards that came before it. Sleek black cowling, compact stance, familiar silhouette. But beneath that familiarity sits a design philosophy the industry will look back on as a turning point. Mercury stopped treating gasoline engines as isolated machines and rebuilt them as evolving nodes in a broader propulsion ecosystem. The combustion unit is no longer the whole story. It is one layer in a flexible platform built for transitions that have not fully arrived, when hybrid assistance becomes normal rather than novel, and when charging posts stand beside fuel stations in more marinas. This platform will be cited as the quiet beginning. It will be remembered not for a dramatic shape, but for its patience, its adaptability, and its refusal to trap owners in a single era of technology. Marine propulsion changes slowly until the moment it does not. Mercury's newest outboard is not a revolution disguised as an engine. It is an engine disguised as a steady step, one that leads directly into the next chapter. If tracking these transitions helps you understand your next boat or the one you already own, share your perspective in the comments. And if you want to follow how other manufacturers react as the market shifts around them, subscribe, because the most meaningful developments are only beginning to surface.